Chapter 110. Tom led us to OJ's cell and we stood expectantly outside. I thought it was perhaps a little peculiar that we were meeting on the block rather than in a visiting room, but peculiar was becoming the new norm by this stage, so I didn't see any reason to question it. Tom turned the key in the lock and swung open the door. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "Mr. OJ Simpson." But before he could finish, AC had burst into the room. "OJ," he shouted, "no!" I looked into the cell and saw OJ's body slumped kneeling with what looked like a strip of bedsheet around his neck. The other end of the sheet was attached to the top of the lower bunk, and the weight of his body had pulled it tight. His skin and lips were blue. There was no movement in his chest or signs of life. AC lifted him up and desperately tried to get his fingers under the strip of sheet. He was screaming and swearing and shouting at us to help, but I guess I was in shock. And then I watched in slow motion as AC jerked at the sheet and OJ's head popped clean off his shoulders and did a few rolls on the floor. I mean, I'm no paramedic, but even I know there's no amount of CPR in the world that's going to fix a problem like that. AC looked aghast, staring alternately at the body and the head and his hands, and then we heard a big booming laugh coming from under the bed. A round-faced black man slid himself out and picked up the head. It was OJ Simpson, holding OJ's head. "You been juiced," he shouted, giggling with glee. "Look," he said, "it's just papier-mâché, like in that Clint Eastwood movie. I've been making this thing for months. Originally I was going to have it sitting on the john, making out like I was taking a shit when you guys walked in. But then I figured there was already enough shitting in these pages. Oh, them Freudians going to have a field day with you, my boy. And I had this brilliant idea instead. Plus, it gives us a nice bit of foreshadowing, too." "OJ, my God," said AC, still flabbergasted and shocked and stunned. "I'm right here, old friend," OJ said. He stepped on over to AC and lifted him to his feet. He gave him a big hug and slapped his back. "I hope you didn't mind my little joke." This guy," said AC, regaining his composure a little. "This guy who was always the biggest joker on the team. It's no wonder he made it so big in those comedy movies. The dude is fucking hilarious." AC laughed, but it was a halting, stuttering laugh filled with all kinds of emotions. "God damn though, OJ," he said, "when I saw you there with that noose around your neck." Tears came to his eyes, and OJ put his arm around him and drew him to his shoulder. "I know," he said. "It's okay. Shh. You know it's going to take a lot more than some noose to stop the juice. Hey, that rhymes. Let's make it into a trademark catchphrase or something. Ain't no noose can stop the juice. The glove don't fit, so you gotta acquit. I like it." And then he turned solemnly to AC. "You brought the gloves, right?" he said. "Let's get that bit of business taken care of first." AC nodded and reached into his back pocket. He handed OJ a pair of black gloves, and OJ took them from him and sniffed them. "Goodbye, old friends," he said. "May you find your way to some better place." He closed his eyes as if to say a prayer, and then opened the small door of a furnace to reveal a fire blazing inside. He tossed the gloves in. "Even old friends must part eventually," he said, somewhat ominously. "God damn, OJ," said AC again. "It's so good to see you. It's been too long, but the old team's back together, and together forever this time. Once you get out of here, ain't nobody gonna keep us apart." There was a cough at the door. "So I'll leave you guys to it," said big gay-finished Tom. "No funny business, okay? And look after that Limey, yeah? I don't want to come back here and find him with a noose around his neck. Though if you got him hog-tied and ready for a stuffing, that might earn you a few credits." OJ stepped over to Tom and they shook hands. I saw what looked like a pair of $100 bills pass between them. "Nobody does it quite like you, Tom," he said. "I'll remember you when I get out of here. You can count on it." "Not long now, Juice," Tom said. 4 weeks and 3 days, OJ said, slapping Tom once on the shoulder for good measure. Tom left and closed the door behind him, and OJ sat down on the bed. "So," he said, "it's time to get down to business. But first there's something I need to know." He turned to AC and addressed his old buddy. "This Limey here, has he told you what the book is about?" AC beamed, his face flushed with gratitude and pride. "Not in so many words," he said, "but I guessed. You can't hide nothing from old AC." OJ nodded his head gravely. Then with one swift movement, he grabbed a large sword from underneath the pillow and thrust it into AC's stomach. "I'm sorry, old friend," he said. "Truly I am, but you were never supposed to know." "But, OJ," AC blubbered, blood bubbling from between his lips. OJ, I said, "I think there's been some misunderstanding. I never told him what the book was about. He thinks it's about him. It's not about me," AC said, swiveling around in my direction, looking dejected and confused, in addition to the awful pain of currently being skewered by a sword. "What the fuck is going on here?" said OJ, furious. "Limey, you got some explaining to do." "Me?" I said. "How am I all of a sudden getting the blame?" OJ turned to AC and held his face. AC's eyes were closing. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He was a baby lost in a strange, cruel world, lacking the strength to even question why. Also, he had the pointy end of a sword sticking out of his back. "Hold on, AC," OJ said. "We can make this work. First, I just need to get this sword out of you." He slowly began pulling back on the handle. "And then we'll have you fixed up in no time." "Ow," said AC, wincing as the sword sliced anew his organs and flesh and skin. A fresh spurt of blood issued from his mouth. His face was grey and gaunt, his body slumped against OJ. "Help me," hissed OJ. "Lower him down onto the bed." "I still don't know why you—" "It's your fucking fault," said OJ. "You wrote earlier, it was such a shame what happened to him in the end. How else was that gonna go? Same with Clooney. You can't just write that shit and then not fulfill it, you know?" Oh, balls, he was right. But I hadn't meant anything by it. I just thought it was a fun little teaser, a nice way to mess with the reader's head and get them rooting for AC. How was I to know it would end up like this, dead due to a harmless misunderstanding at the hands of his best and oldest friend? "Lucky for you," said OJ. "I got magic powers and know how to fix this sort of thing. Otherwise that beautiful papier-mâché likeness wouldn't be the only head rolling on this floor." We lowered AC onto the bed and laid him out flat on his back. OJ rubbed his palms together and held them over AC's gushing stomach. He closed his eyes. "Wait," he said, looking around. "I need my gloves." "They're in the—" "Fuck," he said, racing over to the furnace. He prized open the door and recoiled from the blast of heat. He thrust his hand in and pulled out one half-burnt glove, and then another. He threw them on the floor and stamped on them. "They better still work," he shot at me. "Now hold his head." I did as I was told and watched as OJ stuffed the gloves into AC's mouth before returning to holding his hand above AC's stomach. "O Aris Isotonus," he intoned, "with whom lies the power of life and death. Enter into me now and heal this child, this friend, this beloved soul. Restore to health and perfection his wounded body, and let some other poor sap take his place this day in death's ledger." OJ began to vibrate wildly, and AC did too. His body convulsed on the bed, and a powerful light streamed from his eyes, as it did from OJ's hands. There was something oddly familiar about the whole thing, as though I'd seen it in a dream many years ago. And then I remembered that I had dreamed this exact same scene when I was 8 years old on a caravan holiday in Cleethorpes with my grandparents. It was such a powerful and striking dream I'd even told them about it, and though my grandmother had merely questioned why a prisoner would have a furnace in his cell, my granddad had been more contemplative, nodding his head and prophesying that, indeed, I would one day watch while one black man brought another black man back to life by stuffing gloves in his mouth and chanting prayers over a gaping wound in his belly. And that, when that moment came, I should pay attention to it, as it would have a special significance in my life. It wouldn't just be one more everyday occurrence, such as the many millions of others that passed me by with barely a second glance. But what special significance could there possibly be in this? I mused on it and could find nothing. Perhaps time would tell. Perhaps... "It is done," said OJ, placing his hands in his lap. The light had stopped. The vibrations and the convulsing were no more. The gash in AC's stomach and the oozing bile and juices were gone. He lay as still as a corpse, but he had a steady rise and fall of his chest. "He's sleeping," OJ said. "He won't remember a thing. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell him either, Limey. You can do that for me? I'm sorry I flipped out there, but I'm sure you understand. I was a little caught off guard, realizing I'd just speared my lifelong buddy for completely the wrong reason, thinking he knew what the book was about when it turned out he didn't. But I'll hold my hands up here and admit I'm probably guilty of a slight overreaction. Perhaps I could have taken a few more seconds to gather more information. But you know how it goes." I nodded. I didn't really get it. Sounded a bit long-winded, really, and pointless, when I didn't think it made much sense. But I was happy to go along with just about anything by now. I even managed to resist the urge to ask him how he was going to deal with AC, knowing about his role in the whole 9/11 thing once the book came out. "And if you're wondering about how AC's going to deal with it once the book comes out," said OJ, "well, let's just say things are going to look very different by then. Not just for you, for me and AC, but for the whole world. He'll be fine with it, for reasons you'll soon discover." He turned to AC and tenderly caressed his forehead, and AC mumbled something in his sleep. "Oh, look at that guy," OJ said. "Same old AC. Now, you and I, we got work to do. Are you ready?" I nodded dumbly. I no longer knew what the fuck was going on. Slowly, as if on autopilot, my eyes swung up towards the ceiling and to a television set that had been on this whole time. There was no sound, but the main thrust of the story was clear. George Clooney had been accidentally decapitated while he was on his way home to deliver some exciting news to Amal. In his haste to see her, he had taken what he thought was a shortcut and driven his convertible under an extremely low bridge, ignoring the warning signs, which was quite unlike him. "Poor sap," said OJ, watching the screen as well. "But look at those eyes, look at that hair. Still impeccable, even in death." And there's a bit there that'll make sense if you went on a different path in the Tuesday Adventure story. That's not written in the book, by the way. That's just me reading that out right now. So anyway, there's OJ. "But look at those eyes, look at that hair, still impeccable, even in death." Sounds just like him. OJ crossed himself and mumbled a prayer. Then he took the gloves and returned them to the furnace. "These things," he said, "despite the good they can do, have been nothing but trouble for me. Ah, the stories I could tell. But perhaps we'll save those for another day. Suffice it to say, they truly do have a mind of their own. When you sell your soul to Aris, you'd better be prepared to pay the price." Suddenly it dawned. Of course, Aris Isotona is an anagram of Rio Isostona, or Siri Nusta, or Arise Soton, or... no, I got nothing. But probably if I took all the letters and gave them a number value, I could make them fit something weird to do with the occult or the Freemasons or Bill Gates. All a man needs is a little time. But time, alas, was something I didn't have right then. OJ was busy beckoning me to squeeze myself for a little trapdoor he'd opened up behind the toilet, and from the look on his face, I knew he was in a hurry. I turned back to AC, though, concerned about his well-being and feeling sad to leave him like this. It had only been 2 days since he'd picked me up at the airport, but boy, had we had some adventures together. And now I had to wonder if I'd ever see him again, or if he'd be all right. OJ seemed to pick up on this and put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "He's going to be fine," he said. "He'll sleep it off. He won't remember a thing. As far as he's concerned, he took a nap, and we went elsewhere to discuss our business in private. And you'll see him again, don't worry. You two'll still have some work to do together." I nodded, satisfied at this. I could feel the goodness emitting from OJ's heart, the care and consideration he had for his friend. "This way," I said, pointing to the trapdoor. "You first," he said, placing a strong hand on my back. "I'll be right behind you once I tidied this place up. Irish isotoners have a great deal of mystical and occult power, but unfortunately, they're not much use as far as bloodstains go. Just hang out, have a drink, enjoy yourself. I'll be 10-15 minutes, max." And then he shoved me through, and down I went, tumbling, sliding, going wee and yeah into the darkness, round and round and round on some crazy secret prison, helter-skelter slide until... Chapter 111. I landed with a nice soft plop on a huge air mattress in a windowless room. From the length of the slide, I guessed I was several hundred feet below the prison, and for one awful moment I figured OJ had sent me to my doom, to perish from starvation in an inescapable dungeon. But just as I was wondering if I'd be able to climb back up the slide, I noticed a small door in the wall and made a beeline for it, and found that it led to a large walk-in wardrobe full of expensive men's clothing. Another door from there took me into a bedroom, very clearly OJ's bedroom, and from there I emerged into a party. A full-blown party was going on, deep under the ground, somewhere in Nevada. There were hundreds of people dancing, talking, drinking, playing hopscotch, bumping and grinding, and making out, some of whom I recognized from the pages of Hello magazine. Was that Miley Cyrus sticking out her tongue and making devil signs with Lady Gaga on the dance floor? Was that Oprah Winfrey snogging the face off some strangely bearded leprechaun-looking little German guy? And was that Amal Clooney over in the corner with her hands up the shirt of some muscled Latino guy? Poor woman. And yet from the expression on her breasts, it was clear she hadn't heard the news. But there was no reason to spoil her fun just yet. I wandered into the throng, dazed and confused. My lack of sleep the last few days and the jet lag suddenly hit me. It was well past my bedtime in England, and the thought of curling up in a nice bed somewhere and getting some shut-eye was more alluring than watching any number of tipsy celebrity women grope each other. I turned around, looking for the door back to OJ's bedroom, but in the confusion of bodies and gyrators, I could no longer see it. "OJ throws the best parties," some guy screamed at me in my ear, handing me a drink and dancing away from me. I wondered what made them so good. All it looked like to me was a bunch of people shouting at one another and imbibing substances and liquids that made them less intelligent and subsequently unwell. If only someone had the sense to turn the music down, or better yet, off, they'd be able to converse much more easily and at a far more sensible volume. But no, I guess that was a thought too far. Except, lucky for them, Mr. Sanity had arrived, and off I went in search of the stereo so I could introduce some much-needed quiet to proceedings. I stumbled through the crowd, my eyes struggling to stay open. People kept thrusting drinks into my hands and telling me how OJ throws the best parties. I was carrying about 7 glasses by the time I reached the source of the noise. But, unfortunately, it wasn't just some hi-fi like my old Amstrad Studio 100 that I could unplug or rotate a knob on or change the tape to something a bit more placid. It was a full-on DJ booth with a headphone DJ bobbing up and down with the beat. I approached her from the back and prepared to tap her on the shoulder. But what could I say? Suddenly I felt a little silly and even shy requesting that they turn the music down, despite it obviously being the right thing to do. I even began to think that maybe if everyone else was enjoying it, it was me who had the problem, not them. Well, instead I resolved to find the bedroom and wait for OJ there, to take a little power nap and get my head back together. I was in no fit state for anything, let alone whatever crazy scheme OJ had lined up for me next. It was beyond me how people in adventure movies or Dan Brown novels kept going, never stopping to eat or sleep or piss, unless some critical plot point such as a meeting in a restaurant or a showdown in a bathroom called for it. But this was real life, not some made-up nonsense. I simply had to get my head down before I collapsed. And just as I was backing away from the DJ booth, though, my shaky arms reaching out to steady myself against a pillar, the DJ turned around, and all at once our eyes locked onto one another's. It was Rachel, the prostitute/masseuse from the Peacock Ranch. What on earth was she doing here? She gave me the biggest grin and then grabbed some guy who was standing near her. She stuck the headphones on his head and pointed to a button marked pause and another marked stop, and I saw her mouth the words, "Don't touch those," and she jumped down from the booth onto the marble floor in front of me and flung her arms around me. It was the fourth biggest hug of my life. "Marlon," she yelled in my ear, "what are you doing here? How wonderful to see you." "What?" I shouted at her. "I can't hear you." She looked at me and put a hand on either side of my face. She laughed. "Yeah," she shouted. "Ha ha 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 ha." "What?" I bellowed. "Seriously, can we go somewhere quiet?" She looked at me a little puzzled, as though she was in two minds as whether to laugh and pretend she'd heard me or not. It was great to see her. It felt like months, even though it had only been a few hours. But it wasn't exactly that scene in The Matrix where Neo and Trinity whisper to one another in a booming, cacophonous nightclub. Once again, how I wished it was the movies, where we wouldn't have to shout or pretend or misunderstand or stumble over our words, where we wouldn't begin sentences without a real sense of where they were going and take a dozen or two words to finally figure out what we wanted to say, or to go on for way too long about not very much, or repeat ourselves over and over again, the same old stories, quite often to the same people, and where I wouldn't always be wanting to piss or shit or fall asleep at just the wrong moment. "I really need to pee," I screamed at her at the top of my lungs, deep into her ear hole, "and I'm really flipping tired." Finally, she understood. She took me by the hand and led me to the bathroom. She came in with me and sat me down on the toilet. She locked the door behind us. At last, a bit of peace and quiet. "Marlon," she said, "it's great to see you, but you look exhausted. Like about 5 years older and with even more grey in your hair and a few more wrinkles around your eyes and mouth and forehead. You even look like you've put on weight. What's been going on?" I undid my belt and dropped my trousers and pants. Started a little wee sat right there in front of her. I was too tired to care about anything else. "Can't remember," I mumbled. "There was some guy called Tom and stuck his finger up my arse for a while. Then OJ's head fell off, but it wasn't his real head. And then he stabbed and killed AC with a sword, but brought him back to life with some magic gloves. Then I got a big slide, and now I'm having a wee." Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle went the piss into the water. A little tear fell down my cheek. The exhaustion had reached a whole new level. There," Rachel said, wiping my face. She sat in my lap, holding my head against her chest, and stroked my hair. "It's going to be fine," she said. "Don't you think it's a sign, you being here like this, us bumping into one another? I never turn around when I'm DJing, like never, but something was just pulling me to look back." I mumbled something unintelligible. It could have been something about needing to lie down, or I could have been asking her to bring me a bag of crisps back from the shop, please. My thoughts were a mush of gibberish, my eyes heavy as 2 sandbags. I glued my head to the pillow of her chest and let everything go. She must have picked me up and carried me then, after pulling up my pants and trousers, I presume. For the next thing I knew, I was lying on OJ's bed, waking from a sleep and feeling completely restored. "Wow," I said. "I was out hardcore. How long have I been asleep?" Rachel would have answered, I'm sure, but she was nowhere to be seen. Nobody was. I was all alone. I blinked my eyes and smacked my lips. I stumbled out of the bed and got on all fours on the floor. "Water," I said. "Need some water." "No time for that," I heard OJ say behind me. I whirled around and watched as he emerged from the wardrobe, freshly changed from his blue prison jumpsuit into a smart, expensive outfit from J.C. Penney. He looked at his watch. "Time to go," he said. We got a train to catch." "What?" I said, and then, "Just let me go into the bathroom and just get a little drink from the tap." "On the train," he said. "You can get a drink there, but we don't want to miss it. Trust me." What the fuck, man? What is it with these movie people never staying still or hydrated? 2 liters a day, they say, but I suppose if you never piss, you never have to drink either. OJ ushered me out of the room, through a different door this time, and into a long corridor of some sort. "Shame we're going to miss the party," he said as we hurried along. "Sounds like a real banger today. That girl I got DJing is one of the best. I believe you know her. She also works at the Peacock Ranch." I looked at him as if to say, "How did you know about that? I thought that was just my and AC's little secret that he'd driven extra fast to get to and that you weren't supposed to know anything about it." But he just laughed and told me he knew everything that went on round there. "Plus," he said, "I've seen the tapes. I was watching it live, in fact. Man, I can't believe you didn't make it with her. You some kind of pussy or something? She was totally up for it. Not to mention she'd already been paid." "Nah, man," I said. "She's not really a prostitute. That was just..." And then I remembered my promise to Rachel and kept quiet. OJ just laughed. "How long was I asleep for?" I said, struggling to keep up with him. "I feel like I slept for days." "Okay," said OJ. "That's one thing I don't know. I don't even know you had been asleep." "Asleep where? I hope it wasn't in my bed." He glared at me. "Fresh sheets on this morning, man. Don't make me change 'em." "No, man," I said. "Asleep on the john, if you must know." OJ laughed again. "It's all toilets and asses with you, eh? You really need to get that looked at. Your anal fixation stage should be well and truly over by now." OJ shook his head and then motioned me to take a left at a junction. We were moving at quite a clip. I had no idea why he was so keen to get a move on, and then I remembered, oh yeah, something about a mysterious train, despite the US no longer having any sort of respectable passenger network to speak of. "It was about 12 minutes, by the way," he said, "between me shoving you down the slide and you seeing me come out of the closet. I got that bloodstain cleaned up in no time. Practice makes perfect, as they say, if that helps answer your question." Wow, I thought, it really does work. If all the plot allows for is a couple of minutes kip to inexplicably return you to full alertness and clarity, that's what's going to happen. And, conversely, if the plot had called for me to miss a whole day and a whole bunch of other people's activities, I'll bet I could have slept for like 15 hours just now. What magic. "Voila," said OJ, as we emerged onto an underground train platform next to a single track. "Just in time." I looked up at a departure board. Area 51, it said, 1 minute. Peacock Ranch, it said, 29 minutes. Malibu via Hollywood, it said, cancelled due to leaves on the track. Airport Shuttle, it said, TBC. "Wow," I said, "what is this place?" "This is the rabbit hole," smiled OJ, "and you're about to go about as deep as any pleb has ever been."